The subject today was on the difference between anger and hatred, and also on the importance and the purpose of developing metta, which is friendliness or goodwill, and of forgiving, what it means to forgive. So firstly, if we want to know what we're doing in developing friendliness, developing goodwill, we need to understand its opposite. That means it means to understand what is irritation, what is anger, what is hatred. Because the correct way to understand goodwill is really that it is the opposite, the absence of having any anger, hatred, or irritation. It's not about being in love with the other person or being sort of emotionally involved with them at all. It's really just literally to not have any hatred, not have any anger, not have any irritation, no kind of ill will. It's something that we can practice by simply letting go of anger and irritation, because simply enough, by removing anger, we are automatically compassionate, we are automatically with goodwill, if we have really removed the anger and we're not just pretending to have removed it. But we can also practice to develop it more actively, which is more applicable to hatred rather than just anger or little irritations. So that is why it's important to understand the difference between anger and hatred. Both are essentially ill will, but from two different types of sources. When it's just a emotional feeling of irritation that goes to anger, that turns into bad words, that turns into thinking about how you'd like to get your own back at that person, that is based on just one event in the present. Let's say somebody bumped into you violently and made you spill all your coffee that you'd been so looking forward to drink. Or let's say, I don't know, you hit your own head on something that's sharp and you become irritated and pissed off with yourself. So this is anger arising in the present moment, and we can learn to let go of it in the present moment. But hatred is not something we can just let go of in the present moment, because this kind of ill will that arises is based on a hatred that has been unforgiven. So it goes deeper. It's an enmity that has been kept and carried for a long time, such that even though you're no longer in contact with the person who committed whatever wrong it was, even though they no longer exist in a way, they're now become a different person with a different life, even though you have become a different person with a different life, even though the event of harming is long past and it no longer exists, it's just a memory, even if it's having no effect anymore physically or materially, still the mind is attached to the memory of that person, that event, and it grates with ill will towards them and can still think about them with ill will. So it's not one event. Anytime we see or hear of or have even the thought of the object of our hatred, there is this ill will for them, this anger towards them, or the desire to have revenge. So the difference between the two is that one is like a annual weed that grows up and you can just pluck it out and remove it and then it's gone, and that doesn't live long anyway. And the other one is more like a beech tree that has very deep roots, that even if you cut the tree completely and you don't see it anymore, its roots are still there and can shoot forth new trees. Or another example would be like a blackberry or any plant whose roots will easily shoot forth a new one, give a new appearance. Hatred is like this, and it's important to mention here that it's not everybody who has such objects of hatred who has carried these kinds of ill will with them. Often because of our circumstances, if we are living in relatively easy circumstances where the people around us are fairly kind, where it's more or less agreeable and we haven't suffered any great injustice or been victim to some sort of real cruelty, then we will probably not have this kind of hatred within us. And also it does depend on the type of mind you have. Some people are more easily angered and tend to carry and keep their hatred with them a long time, others less. But we will all have at least the seed or the spark of this irritation, anger and hatred, which all is essentially the same thing, but it comes in slightly different forms. Some more easy to deal with, some more difficult to deal with. So while we can let go of anger in the present, and by what I mean by that is we can let go of this anger that is arising now, doesn't mean that we can just stop being angry forever suddenly like that. It's something that goes much deeper and we have to work on. But anyway, with hatred, it's harder to let go of even one object of hatred than it is to let go of one anger. So that's why for this, it can be very useful to practice metta, to practice goodwill and friendliness, which in practical terms translates to simply forgiving whoever has done you wrong. So just to give a couple of points about what it means, this forgiveness, it's important to say that it's really not about just saying the words, "Oh yes, I forgive you." It has to be really felt from the heart. The aim is to completely let go of any tie, any attachment, any link to that person, to actively decide to let go of any hatred, any resentment, any ill will towards them, and to have only friendliness and goodwill. So it means we have to decide to resolve that, okay, it doesn't matter what anyone else has done or will do. In my mind, here, there will be nothing but goodwill and compassion. And then it means to really do this from the heart. So of course it's more easy to say than it is to do. It also does not mean to go into the subject. That's very important. It doesn't mean to go into what happened, to do a big analysis, like a psychoanalysis, to find out who was right and who was wrong, etc. Your aim is just to train the mind to let go of what is in fact only its own suffering. The mind has been carrying this, holding on to this hatred, resentment towards whatever person, whatever they did to me, or whatever they caused suffering to me for so long, that now we need to train it to do the opposite, trained in goodwill, friendliness, even love to that very person. So, as if with the example of the beech tree, the aim is to uproot the entire tree, leaving nothing left. That's the objective. So it's to find whatever way to see, or whatever way to remove any of the old roots that are left. Even if we've removed the main tree, are there still some left? How can we dig around, find them out, dig them up, just throw them away, burn them? And exactly how we do this will depend on each person. What is the situation? What type of analysis worked for them? One example that Jan was giving was that if he had not suffered a lot of problems or been put in very difficult situations, some of which was because of the behavior of the people around him, but if he had not suffered this, he would never have become a monk. So now, instead of being angry with those people and resentful towards them, having hatred towards them for what they did, in fact, I should be grateful. You were the one who pushed me to go and search for wisdom unknowingly, but you did push me to do that. If you had been different, if things had been different, then by now I would probably have had 3 children, been long time in my job, and I would be deep in the normal family life with no prospect of leaving. Whereas now I've been able to find something much higher. So thank you. And really meaning this thank you, not saying it at all sarcastically, being happy, being joyful, and being grateful, even to that very person to whom you used to feel such resentment. The last thing to mention then is that it goes very deep. We might think we have forgiven, but have we really totally forgiven? It's not enough to just clean superficially, when the aim is really to be totally free of it and totally free of any tie to anybody. Even if before, let's say, you were tied to the memory of that person or the memory of the event with a big thick metal rope, and now you've reduced it to just a little fishing line. A little fishing line is enough to keep you tied. Imagine, for example, you have a boat that's sinking, and now you have to jump out of it and just swim away as far as you can, as fast as you can. But if you are tied to that boat, it doesn't matter with a big rope or with a little thin fishing line, it's still going to pull you down with the boat. And the hatred that is carried for a long time is not easy to remove, not easy to clean. We might think that we have forgiven, yet still there is a tiny thing left that on occasion we can see arise in the mind, that how the mind thinks about this person or this subject, is it really free totally from any resentment, from any attachment to the thing? Is there something left that grates, that is not just free, smooth, as if you were talking about your best friend. We should also keep in mind that it's only anagami who removes hatred completely, all anger and all ill will. So that should give us some indication of just how deep it goes or how difficult it is to remove, and to be a bit wary of thinking that, wow, yes, I have no anger or I'm free of ill will. Because sometimes just we don't see it clearly, it's not obvious, we don't have an object, but it doesn't mean that we don't have the potential for it. Another example about this was on a computer, that if you want to delete a file from your computer, you can click on it and press delete, but then it's still not removed really from your hard drive. In fact, it's very easy to get it back, because you have the little, usually you have a little icon of a dustbin in the corner of a computer, and you can go in there and, there it is finally. I thought it was gone, but it's still there, and you can still bring it back from there. Then if you want to go one level deeper or clean a bit more, now you have to remove it, delete it from the dustbin. But even then, even though the file is invisible and you don't see it anywhere, still the data is stored somewhere on your hard drive. And the only way to really totally clean it, totally remove it, is to defrag the computer. So this is the really final level of cleaning that is only at the level of anagami, that it's totally removed from the system. So to summarize, to understand what is forgiveness and what is goodwill, we have to understand also what is hatred and what is anger, because if there is really goodwill, then there can be no anger. They are opposite to one another. Anger arises in the present moment, and just by removing anger, removing irritation that arises in the present, we are compassionate, patient, and having goodwill at that moment. But it's much harder to let go of deep-rooted hatred that is unforgiven, that has been carried around for a long time. That's where practicing actively goodwill and compassion, to train the mind to have goodwill and compassion, even gratitude and love towards that very person to whom you are having such resentment. The aim is not to have any tie, any link with anybody, no matter what was done in the past and no matter what others do. We can't correct this, but we can correct our own mind. We can remove hatred, remove anger from our own mind. That's the purpose of practicing goodwill and compassion. It's not to do it by words, and it's not to do psychoanalysis. It is simply deciding to forgive. And it is important to understand that it goes very deep, and it's not easy to remove all anger, remove all objects of hatred. Some people will have more or less, but if there really is a deep-rooted hatred or resentment or even jealousy with another person, we should be very wary of thinking that it's gone. Don't trust.